Well, welcome everyone to Law Talk, brought to you by the Falvello Law Firm and their number 570-788-4191, or go to their website, falvellolaw.com. Now, for those of you who have seen me and asked questions about the show and to ask Alexis fellow questions, we're going to address some of them today. But remember, my email is sam@ssptv.com. More than happy to discuss it. A lot of important information. However, if you go to our website, ssptv.com, you'll list shows. And when you hit shows, you'll see Law Talk. All the shows we've done are there. A lot of great information. Some of the things that we talk about this, and it's good to remind people, is let me get to my questions first, and we'll talk about coverage, okay? Maybe somebody coverage. Lady asked me, she said, Miss Roseanne, she said, you know, when you're in an accident or something happens to your car or your truck, okay, you know, you may feel good at the time, but then maybe down the road you get pains. But what do I do if I'm in an accident? You know, I have my cell phone. Do I take a picture? What would be the normal thing to do if I'm not injured that they have to take me to the hospital or whatever?
Right. So, I mean, first things first, you want to make sure that you're doing okay, right? Oftentimes when you're in an accident, you know, there is a shock factor that kind of factors into, you know, how you're doing in the moments after an accident. You want to do kind of a body check to make sure you're okay. And if you're okay, then, you know, steps that you can take to protect yourself legally would be first and foremost call the police. So there's a record of the accident, and there's a record of any witness statements that potentially are out there, any statements made potentially by the other driver, if there are statements of admission of fault, things like that. That's certainly important to have a record of that, and the police are capable of you know, doing the investigation and providing that record if it's there. Something else you could do, of course, would be take photographs of the accident scene. Oftentimes that's helpful, potentially if liability is an issue, meaning if the other person is at fault and saying they're not at fault. If you have pictures of the crash scene, of course, that's helpful to show potentially where the point of impact was, where the cars ended up, and oftentimes the physical evidence, I don't want to say it tells a story because stories are more kind of make-believe and fairy tale type things, but the pictures of the crash can be great evidence as far as what your theory on liability is going to be based on the events as you remember them happening. So it's important to get photographs as well. I will say that oftentimes, you know, people who are in car accidents, perhaps they don't necessarily feel as if they need to go to the hospital following a crash. You know, and then sometimes they do have symptoms that creep up later. It is important to get medical attention if you're in a car accident, just to get yourself checked out to make sure that you're okay. And again, it also establishes a record, you know, of any potential aches and pains that you're having, either, you know, at the crash scene or then, you know, in the hours or days even after the crash happened.
You brought an interesting point up, okay? As you're talking, I'm remembering a person who was hit by a car in a mall. Mm-hmm. And what happened was the person, you know, the car was damaged, side, but he went out and he took pictures of the car. But what he also did was took pictures of the surrounding area. Mm-hmm. He took pictures of where the car was, and it showed an arrow where he was, and it showed. He just took like surrounding pictures, okay, whether you need them or not. And it was helpful because they had then. Sometimes if you're on the highway and you get in an accident, they tell you to move the car off, you know, so you're
for
moving
safety purposes.
For safety.
Right.
So they took pictures, etc., of that. Here again, it's always a challenge because if you're hurt and first of all, you're shook up.
Right.
Okay.
And you're not necessarily thinking.
Well, let's take pictures. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's always good to do that to protect yourself.
Yes, and certainly the surrounding crash scene itself, that's important to get pictures of as well. Sometimes when we have clients come in for an initial meeting, what we do is we pull up a Google map and we put it up on our screen, and that allows then the client to explain to me in detail, to the best of my understanding, exactly what transpired and what they recall happening at the crash scene. We can pull up aerial photos, we can pull up photos from their perspective on, I'm not saying I know how to do this, but I have people in my office that know how to do this. You know, from the perspective of the client who's coming in, from the perspective of the other driver, you know, potentially. These are all things that we do. Sometimes we do hire a private investigator as well to canvass the area for any video cameras. That certainly can be important to get witness statements if we know there are other witnesses that potentially exist that perhaps the police didn't, you know, get their names and contact information. They also take photographs of the crash scene. That's important too. If there's any marks left on the road, you know, that also is evidence that can be beneficial in the long run. So, you know, there's a variety of things that you can do. I like to tell clients, so when they come in and see us, focus on getting better, and then we can take everything else off of your shoulders so you can focus on your health and your family.
So that leads me to another concern. Someone hits you, all right, and it's a serious accident. I mean, they caved your car in or whatever, and you're not feeling too well. Now what happens is you know, you're checking your insurance, who's going to cover what, and you'll find out that the other person does not have insurance. Okay, tell me again the coverage, why it's critical, particularly in these times.
Okay, what I'm seeing a lot of these days are hit and runs, right?
Yep.
Crashes where individuals cause the accident and then they take off from the crash scene.
Exactly.
And despite police investigations, despite private investigations, you don't always get the other person. And that's why it's always important to protect yourself as far as the coverages that you select that aren't necessarily mandated by Pennsylvania law. So that's where the uninsurance becomes important. You want to make sure that you have uninsurance coverage because that's not mandated in Pennsylvania law. And if you don't select that as an option, you're out of luck, and there's not going to be any coverage if the other party is either uninsured or if it's a vehicle that happened to take off from the crash scene that they weren't able to get. So you could have zero potential of recovery if you don't carry the uninsured motorist coverage. Again, that's an elected option, not mandated by Pennsylvania law. So it's important to have that coverage, as well as the underinsurance coverage too, because if you're hit by somebody who's underinsured, it's important that you protect yourself. And it's not, you know, I know we've talked about this before. It's not really fun stuff that you sit down and talk about at your family meals on Sunday, right? When you're watching football and you're thinking, okay, let's talk car insurance. And, you know, also with the state of the economy now, it's tough because people are looking to save money where they can. And that's certainly understandable. But in the long run, if there's an issue where you're involved in a car accident and you don't have the coverage you need, that's just a bigger hole for you to try and dig yourself out of. You know, limited tort, full tort, I know we've talked about that before. It's really important to have full tort so you can pursue non-economic damages in addition to any out-of-pocket expenses that you have. The non-economics, of course, would be the pain and suffering. There's wage loss coverage. That's an elected option that pays you immediately for any lost wages you might incur, depending on the type of coverage that you select. Again, that's not mandated by Pennsylvania law. So it's important to have a look and to have a conversation with your insurance agent to make sure that you're fully protected in the unfortunate event of an accident happening.
If I check full tort, does that cover me on insurance as well, uninsured motorists?
Yes, yeah.
So full tort covers the entire gamut?
Yeah, full tort does.
Okay.
And there are exceptions to limited tort, but you know, you don't want to gamble when it comes to your well-being, really, to have the coverage. You want to have full tort.
We go back to when the very first time you talked about that. There was a lady in McAdoo who listened to the show, and decided to get full tort, okay? And it was only a matter of 3 or 4 days after she got it, she was in an accident, the person did not have insurance. And she just came running to me and my wife. We were at Boyer's supermarket, and she came running on and said, I got to thank you, I got to thank you, I got to thank you. I listened, and we were in an accident. This was like months after. And she listened, she went and got full tort.
Right.
Now, if you have insurance right now, you could certainly call your insurance person up.
Yes.
And I don't like these over the online stuff. I just
Right.
I like talking to an insurance agency.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And say, look, I want to change my car insurance to full tort, and then they automatically do that, right?
Right. Yep. And they can do. Yes, they should be able to do that. Also, with the and underinsured coverage, you also want to carry that as well.
Okay. So, but like I said, if you take full tort,
Yes.
does uninsured coverage come with that?
So if you're full tort, you can pursue economic. It's kind of apples and oranges what we're discussing,
Okay.
right? So if you're full tort, that dictates what type of recovery you're able to get, right? So with limited tort, you can only get economic or out of pockets. That would be medical bills, lost wages, things like that, right? With full tort, you can pursue those economic damages in addition to any pain and suffering that you're experiencing, right? So that'd be the daily headaches, the forgetfulness, the inconvenience of having to go to, 4 doctor's appointments every month. That's the pain and suffering where you really are able to pursue damages that are somewhat subjective, but there are ways of measuring that with reports and nonetheless. As far as the and underinsurance coverage, that's a different category. If you have full tort, of course, you're allowed to pursue the economic loss, but you want to have the uninsured coverage in case somebody takes off after hitting you, or in case somebody's not insured if they hit you, or in case they're underinsured if they hit you. That allows for you to have another kind of cookie jar to pursue damages from in the event that, again, you're hit by somebody who doesn't have the coverage or doesn't have adequate coverage.
So you should also mention about uninsured.
Yes.
If you're saying I want full tort, then I'll also check on uninsured. I want that as well.
Yes, un and under.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so looking at if I don't have my insurance policy, I could call my agent and tell them, I now want full tort and I want to look at uninsurance. I don't know if it's that much more money. It may be a couple $100s a year more, but like you said, God forbid, you never want to use it. It's like
Right.
any kind of insurance.
Yes.
But when it happens, it happens.
Yeah.
Moving on to other things that lawyers do. Okay. We have a couple people who, one lady asked me, or one gentleman, couple, said, I watch Alexis, I love her, she does a great, I like her on the show, and she said, but you know what, Sammy, I'm so fed up in listening, I see these billboards, and we recover billions, and who covered billions? He said, I'm not interested in that. What I'm interested in is I want an experienced person who knows what they're doing and what I need, okay? And so when we come back after break, I want to talk about what you focus on, okay?
Sure.
And what your law firm focuses on. And with all due respect, I'm not knocking anyone. I'm just saying sometimes what you're trying to get across. And, you want someone who's experienced in that field, okay? We'll discuss that. Folks, I'm talking Alexis Falvello. This is Law Talk. Any questions you have, just email me, sam@ssptv.com. Be more than happy to discuss them with Alexis when we come back. We'll talk about some of those concerns about experience. When you need a lawyer, what direction do you go into? We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Law Talk, brought to you by the Falvello Law Firm, 570-788-4191 or falvellolaw.com. Remember, my friends, if you go to our website, ssptv.com, click on shows and you'll see Law Talk, and all the shows we've done are there. A lot of great information, talking about some things right now about information. Alexis Falvello was the owner of Falvello Law Firm. So I was telling you about this couple, and they watched the show and Law Talk, etc. He said, Sam, I see these billboards, we recover billions, and he said, I'm really not interested in that. What I'm interested in, if I need a lawyer, All right, I want a lawyer who is experienced and in the field, the subject that
Right.
involves me. Okay, so Falvello Law Firm. What do you, Alexis Falvello, focus in on?
So a couple things. I think with the marketing billions recovered, that potentially is speaking to the amount of money that's been recovered over the years on behalf of injured clients, right? And I suppose that we could probably do that at Falvello Law Firm, being that we've been in business since 1923, right?
Billions is right.
So
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So, but it very rarely are there settlements that are
Yes.
in those numbers,
Yes,
right? That
of course.
certainly is the exception, rather than the rule. What we focus on at Falvello Law Firm, and what my primary focus and what I enjoy doing are car accidents. I do have experience that I bring to the table, having worked in the Luzerne County District Attorney's Office. I was deputy district attorney when I decided to leave that office and move into private practice full time. One of my responsibilities as deputy district attorney was being in charge of the vehicular homicide division in Luzerne County. So that, for me, allows me to bring to the civil universe of law, I'm able to bring to the table an understanding of what needs to happen criminally, and respecting that process, knowing that it only helps the civil process in the long run. So in focusing on the car crashes, it's easy for me to do because you're fighting for this victims that are similar to the victims that I fought for during my time in the DA's office. And truly, when you're in a car crash, it's somebody who's in the wrong place at the wrong time. And we handle a variety of crashes. It could be somebody who just needs help getting the medical bills figured out, and and they have minimal injuries, and fortunately the damages aren't that bad. To somebody who, I had a client who was a nurse, and unfortunately she had significant lower back injuries that physically restricted her ability to work as a nurse because she couldn't lift patients, she couldn't move patients. But then folding into that were depression and anxiety, and that prevented her from being able to work, in the future. And she was in her 50s. So that was a pretty significant case too, because we had a lot of damages there, but economically, because she was making good money as a nurse, and she had several years of working ahead of her that she wasn't able to do. So, each case is unique. Each case is it can bring to the table a different set of facts, but we've handled them almost exclusively in my practice for many years, and I enjoy doing it. I really do.
What about wills and estates and stuff like that? Yeah.
We do some of that as well. We often get clients that are, hey, can you just draw up a simple will or a power of attorney? We do estate work as well. I have a paralegal who's very, very good at the estate work. My dad does a lot of the estate work as well, although he still says he's going to retire someday. So, but
when I'm 100,
I suppose,
he'll
right.
Yeah.
So he has 25 more years in him, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but we are able to do that as well, and we're happy to help people. And wills we can do, powers of attorney we can do, and certainly the estate work is something that we're able to help people with.
So you always hear about frivolous lawsuits. Okay, people say, they just want to sue just to get money, etc. How do you determine, as a lawyer, whether that case is worthy for you to take on, and it's not a frivolous lawsuit?
Right. So it's funny you should ask that, because one of my favorite snacks is the Reese's peanut butter cups, the pumpkins, right? And I guess on the bag of the pumpkin Reese's peanut butter cups, there's a jack-o'-lantern. And then when you open it up, it's not a jack-o'-lantern. And I think I saw in the news there was a lawsuit, like somebody filed because they were so upset that it wasn't exactly what the package said it would be, and that kind of thing, makes me think no wonder that we as lawyers sometimes get a bad rap, because you have lawyers out there that are actually saying, yeah, this lawsuit has merit, like let's go for it, But there are a lot of different angles that we have to look at when determining whether or not we're going to proceed with a lawsuit. And ultimately deciding to file suit, we want to look at clearly the merits of the case. And oftentimes before doing that, what we like to do is have reports in hand that help us identify the merits of the case, that make us more effective at writing the complaint when we're going to file suit, because we have evidence and we have reports that back up what we're alleging in the complaint. So that's how we
determine.
Really case by case. Yeah, that's how we look at cases.
In terms of determining the case, okay, now there's no charge if I want to tell you about an accident I had or whatever.
Right.
There's no fee or anything.
Right. That's another thing with marketing that, we're talking about marketing. Generally speaking, as far as crashes go, attorneys do not get paid unless there is a settlement, until there is a settlement. And our fee agreements state that unequivocally. You can come in and you can talk to us. Overall, I don't charge for initial meetings because it's, you want to get to know what the issues are for the client, whether or not you can help them. And certainly you don't charge for car accidents unless and until there's a settlement on behalf of the client. So
the other, in other some concerns is, how do you determine, who's the best lawyer? I mean, with all the respect to advertising and marketing, when I see the out-of-town lawyers and these 800 numbers, et cetera, that always bothers me, concerns me.
Right.
And I'm not knocking, I'm just saying I'd
Right.
much rather be dealing with local lawyers, and we have a lot of them in northeastern Pennsylvania
Yes.
who are very well qualified.
And I agree with that
Yeah.
100%.
And so, sometimes you may figure, well, some people are not always honest, and they're trying to get something that they don't deserve. And I think that's where a good lawyer says, look, we're not handling this case in a nice way. Wouldn't you agree?
Right. Well, what I do is, I never tell somebody what they want to hear. Because if I'm telling them what they want to hear, it's not necessarily, the truth, right? And I'm not helping them by telling them what they want to hear. If that client came into me with the peanut butter, and I said, oh, this case has value, it has merit, like there's money here for you to get, that would be, to me, that wouldn't be truthful. I wouldn't, feel that and believe that inside me to be able to advocate for that, right? So if there are clients that you have disagreements with, again, I'm always truthful with them as far as what I think and what I see in the value of the case. And typically at that point in time, I've already worked up the case and looked at the case for different angles. As part of what we have to do too is look to see, okay, what can we anticipate the defense is going to say or what the defense is going to do, because that makes us more effective as the person advocating on behalf of the client who is injured.
It's called ethics.
So,
if you're ethical, you're going to be honest with that person, and because here again, that person they're not there because they want to be there. They're there because they want to resolve something in their life.
Right.
And I think you find most people are like that, except for there's always those. Like even in our industry, there's always a couple shysters out there that make it bad for us. When we're marketing and we're talking about different things, and if somebody else went in there and tried to not be professional, then there's a problem. And I think that's where you're always looking for credibility, experience, and like you said, you go to a doctor, you don't want him. You want him to tell you what the facts are,
right?
Not what you want to hear,
right?
Okay,
right.
Sometimes what he says is good, sometimes
right.
it's well, but how do you rectify it then?
Yes, right,
okay.
right. And that's what we try to do. I try to be honest with clients, and they deserve that too. They deserve to hear the truth, certainly, because they're not coming to you under the best of circumstances,
no.
Certainly. So, I wouldn't be helping them if I gave them false hope with certain things as far as coverages and other things regarding their case.
Other things that we like to down the road, wills are very important. Living wills, and then when I'm sure you have those where someone dies and there's always a contesting of this, or there's a will. They don't have a will, and
right.
Boy, that's craziness. Okay,
yeah.
Folks, I'm talking to Alexis Falvello. The show is called Law Talk, and that's what we're doing, talking law. It is 570-788-4191. Have any concerns? Call. Check your insurance policy. Full tort, uninsured. Make sure you have it. Hope you never need it, but make sure you have it. And remember, if you watch any of the Law Talk shows, just go to our website, ssptv.com. Click on shows, click on Law Talk, and there's a lot of great shows, a lot of great information. We'll see you next time.